One. Hi folks, you're on Radio FM 88 Australia. My name's Jeffrey Shaw. My co-host is Julia Chai in the bottom screen. Top left-hand corner is a guy called Cameron Monley. And of course, it's just gone 7 o'clock here in Queensland. It's 8 o'clock in New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania and the ACT. And it's 10 o'clock in New Zealand, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning for our UK listeners. It's a great show tonight. The gentleman in the top left-hand corner, Cameron, I've actually met this guy on the 11th of the 11th, 2011.
That's it.
And we've become the best of mates, as mates do.
I love this guy.
Thank you very much. And so we're going to have an introduction of how this gentleman entered into the New South Wales Police Force, took a journey into the New South Wales Riot Squad, and then took out one man stationed out in the west of the Never Never in New South Wales. And then a major shift took place on the 11th 11th 2011. He met me.
Major.
He actually met this woman called Lisa. And together the two of them been major transformation. So Cameron's going to give us a heads up on the inner journey of self-realization and going into what's people call the divine masculine. That's where the energy between male and female becomes a bit more subtle and it becomes more intuitive, more inspirational. And
I didn't have to talk about that, but anyway, we got This will be fun. This will be fun.
I mean, your transformation. I mean, it's like bloody bees that honey pot. All females come around you, don't they? I mean, fellas got to learn
without the sting. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you got a wife. I mean, hello, she's on to it. That's not really much of an introduction there, is it? I overstepped the mark there. But I've got to tell you, males, you need to listen up. Yeah. Females, if you've got a fella, brother, son, husband, you tell them to watch this show. Yeah. Have a listen to this guy, Cameron Monley. Great transformation from different heads to, yeah. Julia, I'll pass it on to you.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. Cameron, welcome. So do tell us, you've where did you start? Did you grow up in Australia?
I got to look at the screen. I'm actually an old Liverpool boy, born in Randwick in Sydney, but very quickly went out as in the housing projects where the housing was cheap. Moved out the back of Green Valley in Western New South Wales, western side of Sydney. So, to be honest, I did joke about this, but I never really stood a chance from the start because I had a mother, single child, overly smothered mother, and Mum used to work for the parish priest, Father Frank, who was a great South Sydney supporter. So, from the age of 4 up to when I left at year 6, I would spend every morning with the local priest, have breakfast with the local priest, go to school, back over at the presbytery with the Father Frank, and usually the local deacon. Every old priest had all the young trainees. So, and many of those young fellows became call them my pseudo-uncles. And we'd go in all sorts of little adventures, whether it was chasing the pigeons off the back of the church with the slug gun to whatever. We used to do all sorts of lovely things. And they were beautiful young men who aspired to God and to Christ and to service, So I was incredibly innocent and incredibly sweet as a child. Sadly, on some Friday nights, Mum and Dad would go out and they'd send me over to the convent then, and I'd be in a room with 6 or 7 nuns in hoods and would watch. Remember back in the 80s, you do the Friday night movie. Yeah. And we all had those TV trays and they'd sit me up like the little prince. And there I'd sit and watch the Friday night movie with a pack of nuns,
Who were probably enjoying themselves watching the
movies. They treated me like a king, and I lapped it up. But at the end of the day, where the point I'm getting is that I was incredibly naive and I was an incredibly sweet kid. And somewhere amongst that mix, I wanted to be a policeman. Don't ask me why, but that's what I wanted and that's what I did. So at the age of 19, I started at Liverpool Police Station, which is out back Western Sydney. And at the time, Liverpool was a punishment station for senior police, not for young police like me. So what it meant is that I exchanged the young deacon, who was my pseudo uncle, for young police who perhaps didn't have the best of, what's the word? They were rough, pretty rough and ready, as you can imagine. So some of the things I learned in those days were perhaps not the best way to do things.
So tell us about your first day at work. You know, that's quite a transition contrast you're telling us about. So
all right.
From the presbytery straight to a
first day at work, I can remember
police
turning
station.
up at 7 a.m. And those days we still had the side
holsters.
holster. Remember,
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
cross straws. So that's really taken
So
us
that was
back.
cool.
We didn't have the leather jackets. And I remember standing in the foyer thinking, what the hell? But I was ready to save the world. And in those days, they used to give us a buddy system. And I'm still friends on Facebook with my buddy now. And he was like another young daddy to me. And he gave me a rough time, you know. But rough, I laughed because it was just part of the culture. So that morning, that was 7 o'clock. I got in. By 8 o'clock, I was back up the top of Heckenberg Hill, and a fellow had the night before had put a shotgun to his head and taken his head off, and was laying in the front lawn. And they could, the guys, the young police could obviously see that I was not impressed with the whole scenario, because of course it was the first deceased person I had seen. So to my horror, they decided to leave me there with the body for 2 hours, waiting for the contractor. So there I was, on my own, never seen a body before. And so it was very harsh, because you wanted to look, you didn't want to look. You wanted to look, you didn't want to look. So that was 8 o'clock. By 11, or it might have been 12, we were out on the highway at Heathcote Road. A lady had crashed her and set a car alight. So there was a young woman in her 30s and a 2-month-old baby, and both with 90-degree burns. And the ambos, of course, had to work on the child, and they said to me, "We want you to drive the ambulance." And I turned to the sergeant. I said, "I failed my truck driving course. I wasn't allowed to drive the police trucks at the time, because I sucked at reversing the F100 trucks." And the sergeant just looked at me like a fool and said, "Do you think they really care if you're certified?" So by 3 o'clock, I was still in a level of shock. I came home, Mum sitting at the kitchen table and baked me a banana cake and to celebrate my first day in the cops, you know. So that was my life for 18 years, you know, dealing with death, violence, domestic violence, you know, street offences, drugs, people dying of drugs. Oh, I was there. That was the 1985 riots at Bathurst. Oh my goodness! I was driving the paddy wagon that night, and my role there. What had happened? There was a police compound at the top, and some of the local bikies were doing what do you call that? When they swerve round and round and round? Donuts. And some of the locals tried to local coppers tried to stop them. And what there was a kiosk about 100 metres, 50, 100 metres from the police station, which was made out of brick. And what they decided to do was pull the kiosk down, and they started hurling half house bricks at us. So we were surrounded by about 3,000 bikers.
Oh, really?
Throwing house bricks at us, and we would form a line. You can see here, and Molotov cocktails. So we'd be in a line, and you'd say, "Red bloke over on the left at 1 o'clock," and he was the one throwing the Molotovs, you know. And then we were in a line with the shields, you know. That I got a house brick hit me that day, and I very proudly wore my jacket, put a hole through my police top, but I had a bulletproof vest which took the impact. And then we'd do a run, and we'd run at the crowd, and you'd say, "Get the bloke in the red," because he's the one throwing the Molotovs. And everyone would turn to run, but they couldn't get away because there was another 10, 20 people behind them. So my role that night was to take the prisoners from the compound down to Bathurst Police Station. And what there was a little nasty little track that went off onto the Mount Panorama track, and we'd turn right and we'd zigzag our way down. But what they'd worked out, they'd see us coming, and they'd all grab a house brick each, and I would turn right, and as we were down the track, and the track's not very wide, we'd get pummeled by about 30 to 50 house bricks in the police wagon. So at that point of time, we had riot shields in the doors. We had a grate across the window that stopped that, but one fellow had pulled a stop sign out, and he'd hurled, and the actual pole came through the windscreen of the car. And I think that was probably one of the most frightening nights of my life, because I thought, I'm going to die tonight. And I said to the sergeant, so what am I going to do?
Were you surprised? I mean, that sounds like the crowd was furious, and what?
I was just enraged with alcohol, and they didn't like police. It was a bike riot. It was a bikies festival. So from then, at that point, I joined the riot police, it was called the Tactical Response Group, and basically all we did were high risk jobs. We worked in with the armed hold up and the DEA, Drug Enforcement Group, and we would assist. So if there was someone who had nominated, who had done armed hold ups, we would dress up at 5 o'clock in the morning while they were still asleep with bulletproof vests and helmets and shotguns, and would smash the front door in and get them before they'd get out of bed. That was our morning job, and then we would have what was called a high risk vehicle, which was a Toyota Land Cruiser, and it would be fitted out with all the riot gear and all the good stuff for all the violent jobs. And we were stationed around Liverpool, Macquarie Fields, Blacktown, and all we did was assist with violence, and I did that for 2 years. So, it was kind of very exciting. It was very, we'd call it the shrub on the job.
So you must have been good at it. Did they train you in martial arts or just boxing, or you just that physique? And...
We were trained in certain techniques with batons and shotguns and things like that, but a lot of it's just common sense and repetition.
Right.
I still remember, we all get, let's say, for example, we watch a scary movie. Scary movies are scary, and then you watch a scary movie enough times, you become deadened, or you become, what's the word?
Yeah, dulled.
Dulled by the sensation. You deal with violence enough times, you become dulled. So I can still remember we had a young instructor, and he was an ex-commando. Oh my God, he was like a king to us, But 12 months down the track, they had made a rule that if we were doing a job near one of the instructors, we would pick them up on the way to the job. Now, this fellow was like a king to me, but because he had done an instructor role for so long and not done the actual jobs, you could see he was a mess because he wasn't used to doing the job.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different.
Desensitized. I think desensitized is the word. And on that subject, I suppose, as much as I love people, and I'm still as loving back then, I love people way back then as I do today, I became desensitized to all those things that we take for granted, because out of sight, out of mind. But when you live that on a 24/7 basis, one of my favourite sergeants, he was in the child mistreatment unit, and he quit that when he started making jokes because he became desensitized to dealing with those scenarios. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And did you find that happening to yourself as well?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. And some of it's not a lack of disrespect, it's just a coping mechanism, coping with harsh scenarios. You're turning up to jobs where woman, poor Asian lady suffering with postnatal depression had drowned. Very clever. Sloughing with postnatal depression. She drowned both her babies.
Oh, wow.
So I turned up to that job, and that was my job to handle that.
Yeah.
You know, but very luckily for me at the time, I had no children. I just pushed my chair down. I had no children, but the policewoman that I was with had children, and it really threw her around badly. You know, so I loved every day, and I miss every day of not being there. You know, the adrenaline, and there's a lot of good that comes with it as well. You know, I think a lot of it is coming back to service, being of service to the public. I keep forgetting I can't look over at you that way. So, so what happened was that innocent boy became a hardened man. You know, 5, 6, 7 years. There's different words you could call it, but you build a bit of a mongrel inside you, you know, and that's your coping mechanism, because you're dealing with people who are mentally ill, and you're dealing with people who are outrageously violent, and in certain cases just wretched. So you have to work out a salesmanship to sell good behaviour, and that's what I did, and that's what I did very well. The innocent boy disappeared. You know, Landmark talks about wearing coats. People put different coats on to hide their sensitivity or to protect that sensitivity. So from that sensitive boy, I became very good at what I did. And from being the kid that was picked on at the first day at the police station, I became the one that picked on the new boys and did that very well. Nothing I'm proud of, but it was just the way the culture was. You know, I was always a bit odd. I never drunk at that time. They'd drink beer and chips. I would drink green tea and dates, and they would look at me like I'm a fool, you know. But I had a capacity for violence because of the area that I came from. That they treated me like that I was a bit odd. They were terrified of me, so they would never cross the line. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So with that skill set, I went to Outback New South Wales. The TRG was good, but very much a boys' club. I had 2 young children and decided, did I want a marriage or did I want to be part of a boys' club? So I escaped to the country, and I escaped to a place called Ingonia. And back at Burke, 120k from the next policeman, 11 houses, 20 people, and an Aboriginal mission about, I think about a K down the road. So it was a very, very, very wonderful experience for me. It cost me a marriage because you don't take a wife and young children to the back of Burke, as you can imagine.
It's very remote.
Very, very, very remote. And so we learned different things there, because in a small community like that, it was much easier than in a bigger community because you can't escape, so you had to get on.
Yeah, you'd have to.
And what I learned, there it is, wonderful. That was my house, and that was the police station on the left. Really flashy. We had the public school was next door. So in the town of 11 people, there was me, and there was only four of them were Caucasian, and the school teacher had a son, and there was 4 kids in the school. There was my son, her son, and 2 little Aboriginal boys from down the mission. So it was pretty cool. The school had a pool. It had everything, as you can imagine, out back. Yeah. Oh my God, that's him.
So as a policeman there, or being the manager in charge there, what was your biggest challenge?
I didn't really work hard.
It wasn't.
Because there wasn't a lot of crime.
There wasn't a lot of crime.
No. But, you know, we'd have the odd deceased car accidents because of the highway.
Oh.
But the main thing was dealing with the local community, and it was very interesting because I learned very quickly that how to disassociate people's who they are and their actions. Good people do bad things. And what I learned, that doesn't make that person a bad person. It's just they've made a bad choice at that time.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, they're not coping, so they freak
Not
out.
coping. We're talking about first, second, third generation alcohol, domestic violence, unemployment, and there's an entrenched culture within that community.
Mm.
So what I learned was to love the worst of the people, look beyond their actions, and they're just people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call him my best friend, but one of my major associates had 30, 40 notches against him, and most of them were assault occasion. He was a pretty violent lad in his 30s, and we used to go out pigging together in the police car, and we'd grab a couple of young teenagers, because what we'd do, we'd go catch the pigs, and we'd bring them back. And because what I learnt was that on the Thursday, people would get paid, and then they would drink. And most of the time, they would drink 2 or 3 days and not eat. And that there's a form of alcohol psychosis that comes with that thing. So what I would do on Thursdays is that we'd put a barbecue on, and I would put a feed on. So normally I'd catch a pig, or we'd get a roo or an emu, and we'd put it in a pit, pack it full of eucalyptus leaves, like a honey, and we would feed we'd feed everyone. You know what I mean? And it was a lovely thing. So we're going back to me and Guy. We'd go out in the car with a few teenagers, chase a pig in the bush, catch it, and sometimes I can remember we'd run a couple of 100 meters in the bush, and one day in particular, Guy went back and he got the police car and he drove it back to me, and I was watching the teenage boys and they were giggling at the thought that this bloke's probably done 5 to 10 years jail. And I said to them, "It's a car with stickers. It's a car with stickers. Let's not get more than that. I'm just a bloke with a police uniform on. I'm still a person." You know what I mean? And I went, "Oh, we never thought of that. It's just a car." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
People brand so much into it. So from there, I learned that. And from there, I went back to Dubbo.
I think there's a lesson in that because, there's that, especially as we have so much conflict in society, Republicans versus, Black Lives Matter, etc. People just get so entrenched in them versus us, and that ability to, not get limited by the stereotyping, not get sucked into that
black, yellow,
artificial
doesn't
conflict.
matter who you are, slanty eyes, people stereotype.
Yeah.
And look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to say a percentage, but a percentage of every community, whether you're a policeman or a doctor, or I was in another town where we think the local doctor used to come and peek through windows, get on the drink, you know what I mean? So there's a good part of and a good bad part in every part of human
community.
nature.
Yeah.
But you put it into a small cauldron and stir it up, shit's going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
Increase that with low employment,
yeah.
alcohol,
Drugs,
all those things.
Yeah.
So it's a plot. So you're dealing with the same people over and over. The joys of the littler towns, it's not so bad because you can't escape each other. Does that make sense? So I went back to Dubbo with a skill set and much bigger town. And Dubbo was really the holding centre for the whole Western region, So what I used to do, I got into a squad and I used to travel around all the Western towns with 2 or 3 young blokes, and we would deal with antisocial behaviour because that was my skill set. Honey, hammer. I'd be friendly. I'd be jovial. And at some point you'd say, "We've got to cross the line here. You either conform or shit's going to happen." Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you would kind of have an objective, wouldn't you, when you turned up?
Well, it's all about
like
selling good behaviour, isn't it?
selling good behaviour.
Selling good behaviour.
Yeah.
People are smashing things. People are running around with knives in their hands. You know?
So how do you turn people who are sort of, just about to loot and riot because they're incredibly fed up? And they think
I
nobody
can remember
cares,
one day, for example,
and they've got nothing to lose.
There's a level of compassion too. Like so for example, I was at one place, there was a group of them playing up. I'd say, "Come on, John." I can't remember his name now, John. Let's call him John. Let's not be stupid. So what he does, gets a bottle of beer, smashes it, and he's waving it around like a madman. He's going to cut my throat. You know. So I turned to the young bloke and I said, and it was those days when mace was just coming in. And there was probably 10 or 15. I said, "Have you got the mace?" He said, "I left it in my cupboard."
Ooh.
And I said, "Oh, great." So I stood there with my hands in my pocket, being as non-confrontational as possible.
Yeah.
We're making jokes, blah, 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 blah. So what I start to do is walk towards him. And as I walk, he steps back. As I walk, he steps back. And then what he realises is that he's broken out past the group.
Ah.
So he does the run. So, of course, we follow him. He jumps in the creek out in the middle so I can't get him, undoes his zip and starts waving something at me, telling me what he's going to do with it, So what we do, we just stand there because it's winter time.
Right.
And wait till he gets too cold.
Right.
He comes in and he goes, "I'm sorry, Cam." I said, "Come on, you Dave, I'll drive you home."
Oh, yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. So it's kind of the de-escalation. So
Because at the
isolation.
end of the day, he lived 2 doors from me.
Oh, wow.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what I learned was that arrest was not the ultimate suggestion. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I ended up as a sergeant's job at Warriner, which was very much a confrontational town, and there was a very poor relationship between police and the local community. And I used to walk down there where they'd all congregate every day. Was no longer, because we could go down there and have a chat and everything was okay.
Yeah. So
And that's where, they'd say, one of the local boys would say, "I don't like Cribby, he's a big fat policeman." Well, yeah, he is. But he's not a bad bloke and he's funny. You know what I mean? And Cribby would say, "Oh, I don't like him." So what happened was people started to learn that the action does not make the person a bad person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you'd give them an opportunity to put on some other clothes and play another role and define themselves that way.
But everything other than arrest.
Yeah.
So we'd turn up, they'd be all running around, playing up, and I'd just say, "John, get in the truck. Don't be a dill. I'll drive you home." And they get in the truck, I'll drive them home.
Because they do get into that having to prove themselves in a pack group. I mean, my tradesman his son ended up in a stolen car, and he was just
You try to match.
crowd.
That's if you try to match violence with violence, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it just escalates.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've had a wonderful and fulfilling life in the police. I've seen the worst and I've seen the best. I've dealt with culture. I was an Aboriginal liaison officer. I was a gay liaison officer at one point, which was very challenging.
Oh.
No one wanted to do it, so I put my hand up.
You brought out the tea and the dates?
Well, no, it was very interesting. And all I'm saying is there's all different sides of the community, So in the year 2000, I moved back to Sydney, started selling magnets as a hobby, and I left the police because I was making too much money. It was 2000 was the Olympics. And I took 12 months leave without pay. went from 1,000 a week to we're making 10 to 20K a week selling magnetic therapy products. And when the police said, well, the Olympics are on, you can't take any more time off, I jumped off.
I think that's many people don't realise that the police is really underpaid in this country, isn't it?
Oh, no. Look, in those days I was getting paid 100,000.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Yeah, so it was all right. I was a sergeant of police. It was not more than that. I decided to go into private enterprise, into the real world, which was pretty scary, actually. So from there, you know, the interesting thing tonight, we're talking about transformation. And so I was a thug.
So, Jeff, when you got to meet Cameron, was he a thug then, or was he already a reformed thug?
He was just a smart ass, weren't you?
Smart ass.
Sharp.
What made you say that? What do you remember about him?
You going to tell that story?
Well, because what we'd done, so what had happened was that when you leave the police, or when I left the police, we used to call it the throb on the job.
Yeah.
And it's the adrenaline rush, and it becomes quite addictive. So I would look to other ways to do that. And like turning 40 was a midlife crisis for me. At 39, I joined Muay Thai at Buchu. I'd joined Buchu and I was training, and at 40 I was going to get in the ring.
Right.
And just because I could. And what happened was my shoulder packed it up and I couldn't do it. And I said, I'm going to join a pistol group. And someone said to me, why don't you join a spiritual church? I said, well, I don't want to join a spiritual church. I want to join a pistol group. So what happened was I joined the Ring Spiritual Church. And that's really when my life changed, because the people were beautiful. They were honest. They were wholesome, trustworthy. And I just felt as if I belonged, if that makes sense. Elizabeth Travascus was my reverend, and oh my God, I adored her. Do you remember her? No? Mm-hmm. And they used to jokingly call me her stalker, so I did all the things for her. And everything changed. Everything changed.
So for those of our listeners who haven't been to a spiritual church, how is it different from, say, the Presbyterian one that you grew up
it's not really
working with?
It's a spiritualist. Well, Jeff, how would you describe a spiritual church more than a church? It's you know, different. They all vary. Some are religious based, some are not, depending on the reverend at the time. But you know, we had psychics and mediums and meditation. I'd never meditated before, and suddenly I was meditating, and it was a really lovely experience. I thought I could really get into this. So what we started doing, being a little social butterfly, I lived at Warwick Kappa's old house on the hill up at Upper Coomera, and we used to call it a full moon meditation night. And I'd invite everyone from the spiritual church up, and we would have dinner. We'd do a meditation, and then we'd sit around the fire and drink red wine till 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever we did. And it was really lovely. But then Lisa came along, and I gave up alcohol. I gave up coffee at the time. I was drinking 6 to 8 coffees a day and probably 10 to 15 nips of scotch a night. And that's when my life really changed, because I loved her more than the demons that kept me going. And really the coffee and the alcohol just deadened all those feelings. And I remember in those early days, and this is going to get a bit serious now, that I used to start to cry. And I couldn't work out why I was crying. And it was just because I was just starting to feel emotions that I hadn't felt for 10, 20 years. And most of it was pain, and there was a lot of sorrow. And what I learned, that I was angry at a lot of things, but that anger was really just the mask of me being so sad over certain scenarios in my life where I'd been hurt. And without the buffer of the alcohol, I was feeling everything. And sometimes I'd be laying on the floor sobbing. And Lisa would say to me, just go with it, honey. Just go with it, honey. And it was really lovely. It was really, really lovely. Unpleasant, but cathartic in that it was just like a beautiful release. And I thought, well, if I can do that, other people can do it as well.
Yeah, I hear from people who've done the landmark course that that's one of the big things, that it gives them permission to tune in and, there's a safe space where you can basically feel what's been locked up and you feel better afterwards.
Yeah, Landmark was a great experience. It was a great job, but it wasn't because of Landmark that I'd done that. It was just because I started to do the work. That's such a terrible catchphrase, but I started to meditate and I started to make good choices. And that's part of being a conscious male. Before, when I was a maddie, I'd get away with murder because I wasn't aware of the consequences of my action. But as a conscious male, I'd say to myself, if I'm going to do this, I know that perhaps it's not the best thing that I could do for myself. And so I started to make better decisions. But it was very hard to let go because I liked that rascal. I liked that thug. And for 30 years, and that's what I based my whole self-worth on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was very good at being a bad boy. So the badder I was, the better I felt about myself.
Right.
Acutely dysfunctional. But
so
we're all not perfect, you know what I mean?
Jeff, can you relate to this? Is that sort of how it works with guys? You just the old surf club. What was that, Jeff? So what was your, so Cameron's when he fessed up, the batter he was, the rascal, kind of like the tough guy. What were you? It's the culture, isn't it, in Australia?
That's right. No, not in Australia, but just
generally.
Whatever sections. I was in a police culture.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming the police. We did a lot of good stuff, but that was the way it was,
Yeah. No, I think this is also useful for me. I mean, I've only got 2 girls, so it's about understanding what, when young men are setting out in society, how do they define themselves and how do they position themselves? So, Jeff, do you want to take the spotlight off Cameron for a bit?
The Fitzgerald inquiry came into Queensland, and there's 3 SB bookmakers mentioned in the Fitzgerald inquiry: Mr. T, Mr. H, and Mr. Z. I knew all 3 of them personally.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they all operated in New South Wales. Had the phone switched from their diverters here in Brisbane. Take the bets. We were told to get out of the unit at 7 o'clock in the morning. The local police would make a phone call to say, we've got to come around today, Mr. T. I'm okay, who do you want to leave? So. Mr. H was the funniest story because Mr. H is, we'll go back to Mr. T because in the unit there had all these real estate signs sold, under contract, for lease, for rent. And Mr. T would say, who's selling our unit today? So put the sign up. And of course, when the Fitzgerald inquiry came up, it was all about the fact that these SB bookmakers were always forever moving premises. We couldn't track them down. But the thing was, they rang up and say, we come around here, you're going to leave there for us to arrest. And so they take the betting sheets and they photocopy them, give the photocopy sheets back to Mr. T, Mr. H, and Mr. Z, because they have to settle up. That's the Australian way of life, isn't it? They had the evidence in the court. So Mr. H's case, that was so funny. They got the grandmother who was 79 at the time. So they left her, so the police came around, took Mrs. Nico. So then, of course, these SP bookmakers, they got all the connections through our society. And of course, the next second, the Sunday Telegraph and the Sunday Mails come out and says, pensioner can't afford to live on a pension, has to do SP bookmaking. It's a sad state of affairs. Of course, she gets let off and they fine, you see. But I've been to drinking schools and you've had the federal member of parliament, the state member of parliament, the local councillor. One of those Mr. H, Republican, guys from the president of the Wolfies Club, the Federated Clerks Union. I mean, there's a big drinking school. You know, they all share knowledge, and of course, the politicians have got the opportunity to have the freedom of speech in Parliament. So it was an interesting life that we saw, and that was projected. But the Australian way of life was quite surreal in the sense that, you know, the Liberal National guys would go down to Ballymore and have their little chicken sandwiches and champagne at Ballymore, and rugby league boys would be going down to Link Park. And, it was really us and them in that sense.
You know, I think a lot of it is, you know, we're going to get serious now, is the change from bravado to being heart-based.
Mm.
You know, bravado is
Yeah.
the chest beating, to being a heart-paced person.
Which must be very brave, because, you know, one is you're wearing the colours of your team and acting like the team, and the other one is you're actually willing to do it your way and make a choice at that point in time.
I mean, it's a shock around. I mean, football club and surf club mentality. You know, surf clubs, you know, don't go into the surf after drinking or having food. But I mean, we certainly live those principles. But when we decamped the flags and all stuff, we're straight across into New South Wales, straight to the Seagulls Police Club, and you know, we're there living there every Saturday or Friday night, Saturday night. It's huge, but that's a lifestyle where you could drink and drive. You know, you can't do that today. I mean, the handbrake's gone in our society, isn't it? And we all mingled, and it was a booze culture, wasn't it?
Very much so. I remember some of the people may have seen with Robert De Niro, was a movie called Dirty Grandpa. Remember Dirty Grandpa? Something like that.
Yeah, I took my parents to see that by accident,
I bet
and
you
my
were horrified.
daughters. And I absolutely walked out after.
So I went
3
with
minutes.
Lisa to this, and I giggled and I laughed and I giggled and I laughed and I laughed, and I said, "Holy shit, that's me!" All the way through. Lisa was horrified, and I watched it and I watched it and I watched it, and as we walked out of the movie, I involuntarily started to cry, like there was a sob, and I went, "I missed him. I missed that part of me." You know, and there was, and it's very much a tug of war. You know, holding on to what the dysfunction that you base your life on, or the lie that you base your life on. It's a lie. To living your truth. Yeah. And then it's a tug of war. It's easy to live the lie, not that easy to live the truth. And then it comes to discipline and commitment. Huh? And discipline, commitment doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just, you just have to be disciplined, because it's very easy to forget. And it's very easy to fall back into the lad. And I do it I still do it now. I go into a place when there's all tradies. Back into the lad, it's fun. Much nicer if I could be mature and be the smart one. Be not smart, be the conscious male. I don't have to lessen myself to conform or to fit. I can be myself, and it doesn't really matter. But it's a self-based thing, and it's all about self-worth and what I base my self-worth on. I base my self-worth on that, so I've got to be that to be accepted. And what I've learned over the years is people love me just as much for the loving, vulnerable, sensitive man that I am today. They love me more, rather than being the little rascal. So it's a tug of war. And I still suffer on a daily basis. Suffer's not the right word, but I still wrestle. You know, Jeff and I, we still banter on and have a bit of fun. You know, this is not. It's good.
Yeah, we talk.
Man,
stuff.
But the reality is the things that, like, think of a scout badge. You know, for many years, all those bad behaviours, I wore them like a scout badge. I've done that.
Honor,
I've done that.
yeah.
I've done that. I've done that. Holy hell, I'm good. I'm an arsehole. You know what I mean?
Well, I have to
So there's the point where you say you've got to come from that mentality to say, one, it's not a good thing that I've done, and I've got to feel sorry, or there's a level of regret that for the actions that I've taken, and then the next step is forgive myself because I didn't know a better way, and just move forward. Yeah.
Well, you don't really see male role models, isn't it? I mean, you don't really hear male voices in our society anymore. And when I say that, I'm talking about going to school, where we used to have male teachers in our, state schools and our high schools, and that they really give it to you, and you got the cane, the sense of discipline came through, and you got male role models and scouts and football clubs and all that stuff. I mean, the rites of passage for a young boy or a young woman these days has been dispersed with the fact that you have to have a yellow card, blue card, white card, whatever. I mean, it's sort of over-regulated, but nowadays, everybody knew everybody because you grew up in that same suburb, and everybody was connected. And if everybody knew where the usual suspects lived, they all got brought into heel. I mean, in football, when we were playing for Valleys, I mean, you had under 18s, under 21s, under 23s, C grade, reserve grade, A grade. I mean, there's males all the way through there in a pecking order who would pull you in the line. Yeah, there's no mucking around. So when you see how football, how it's migrated to having say like the Broncos, I mean, you got 25 young men, but they don't have that male peer group all the way through there who's giving them some tip over the head and bring them in the line. Like being paid an exorbitant amount of money, whereas nowadays, guys were either working on the back of rubbish trucks or they're bricklayers, or labouring in the meatworks or something like that, and then they come in and get their $50 a week playing for rugby league. So a whole different mindset for rites of passage for young people, and as a result, you're not hearing the bass voice and you're not hearing the baritone, and we having our whole society's being brought up on solo parents, and then you might see the Brady Bunch situation taking place, and then you're handing over your children every fortnight to the other partner. You were really being quite fractured in our community status. I really feel for the young people.
It's very hard. Very hard. And I remember many years ago, I said that I had an interview with Kawina, and she said to me, she was 81 then, a little psychic lady, and she said, the past and the future are not my, I used to have to say this every day, the past and the future are not my reality, I live in the present. Okay. But I'd say just in case it worked, the past and the future are not my reality, I live in the present. I go, she's a fruit, but I'll do it just in case, you know what I mean? Past and the future are not my reality, I live in the present. And I'd say it over and over and over, I still never got it. And then somewhere down the track, I realized that every time I think of something from that past, if I think that sorrowful thought, or I think that angriness of that person that's done me wrong, I'm bringing that feeling, that emotion, that moment, I'm bringing that to my present moment now. And I'm mudding that beautiful, beautiful heart-faced feeling that I'm feeling right now with crap from my past. So
it's about mastering your thoughts and emotions. When you said, it requires discipline and commitment, is that what you're talking about? Cultivating awareness as to what's happening internally and how it's impacting you?
It's part of an emotional awareness and an emotional discipline. I catch myself with certain thoughts and sensations, and I say, this does not serve me anymore. I'm not a big reader of books, but I love the Bhagavad Gita, I probably can't even pronounce it properly. But, you know, they talk, and that's a war against emotions. We're ruled by our emotions.
Mm.
And I've got to the point now, most of the time, I still have my tantrums and outbursts, but I get to the point, and rather than saying I'm angry, I can feel some I feel some anger coming on.
So you're not identifying with it.
I'm not angry.
Immediately you're saying, yeah,
Oh,
you're
I can
noticing
feel the
it.
anger.
Yeah.
What's it feel like? Okay, it doesn't serve me. And this is where my meditative practices, you know, my best friend was a doorman from King's Cross, hardest man I've ever been with, and he used to call it my spiritual crap. And I used to prod him about meditation, and I sent him this 5-minute meditation. He said, I feel really good.
So surprised.
You know, he said, that's really, really good, that meditation. And so I give him another one.
Yeah.
So every day I have a practice, and I say ritual turns to reverence. One of my silly sayings. I have lots of silly sayings, but I have a ritual. I get up in the morning, I light my candle. I sit down. I have a yoga mat and a meditation mat where every day I go do meditation. And I commit to doing that practice. These days, if I'm not out doing things, I'll commit to at least half an hour to an hour of meditation every day. And what it does, it creates this beautiful bubble. And that bubble is my dodgem car. It's my buffer to the world. And with practice, the more I practice it, the more I'm able to carry that buffer or that bubble throughout the day. There's Master Yang. I love Qigong. I'm a mad Qigong man. And I practice Qigong every day as well. I injured my arm, but I've been practicing Qigong for about 2-3 years now. Oh, you do that too, that's right.
I do. I love it too. And it's basically my buffer. You know, if I do that in the morning before I go to the office, you know, my day it felt like I'd done something for me. And
that's correct. Well, I do a half an hour Qigong,
and
then I'm in that bliss bubble, and I do a half an hour of meditation, and I'm out with the fairies.
Yeah. So you teach people now how to do that? We've got you down as the infinite connection.
Well, what happened was that meditation night, that full moon meditation, we were doing that. It was a party. It was a party with a meditation. That was my thing. And what happened was, I said, let's open it to Facebook one time. And what happened then was that on the 11/11/11, I opened, instead of having the 20 or 30, I opened to Facebook, and I invited everyone to come along. And our first night, we got 150 people turn up. So for a period of time then, I networked very strongly with all the sound therapists, the psychics and mediums, and we used to call it full moon meditation, but we changed it because it wasn't always on the full moon. And for about 12 months, 2 years, we'd get 200 to 300 a night turn up at our events. And we were kind of the benchmark for those type of things. And what the lovely thing was is that it encouraged people to go out and do it. Some would say, oh my God, these two are inspiring, I'm going to go out and be of service. Or someone would say, well, I can do better than them, I'm going to do it on my own. But what happened was the public got the benefit because there was more opportunities for people. I started a page. In the beginning, it was called a Facebook page called Spiritual Churches of Queensland or something like that. But what happened, it failed because either one, the reverence never, and what the idea was that it was for all the spiritual churches to promote who was on platforms. So it gave people choices. What happened, either the reverends were computer illiterate or they never saw the worth in it and they didn't do it. So I changed it to Southeast Queensland Spiritual Connection. And what it does, I've got about 12,000 people on it now, and it gives people choices of where to go or who's doing what. And that's what it's all about. So what I used to do, I used to throw some money onto these nights, and boost the post, I'd get 200 to 300 people. Sometimes it'd be 50 to 100 people that were new and they're wanting to put their foot in and taste what it's all about. And what I would do is have different people in the community who used to run meditation. So Jeff would say, okay, my name's Jeff Shaw. I live up at Springwood. I'd run meditation Tuesday nights. And you'd say, I'm at Underwood. I run them on Wednesday nights. And I'd say, well, everyone, remember who lives near you, and you go see that person after this.
Mm.
So the whole idea was during the month, you go do your meditation with them, and once a month we'd all get together and meet in common.
Mm.
It was a really lovely thing.
Yeah, I went to one or two events, and I just love the fact that you also had musicians and, you know, meals, because I think, you know, meditation could get very serious. And, you know, it can also be intimidating because afterwards you're in a big group and everybody's sort of saying what they experienced, and it just gets wow. For the newbies, it might be like, oh, but, you know, just being able to mingle and have the music as well, I think
Correct.
was great blend.
It was really, really lovely, and that's what we found. With Lisa is like a Mother Teresa. She just loves everyone. She's the most beautiful woman I've ever met in the world from the inside. She's amazing. And what we've found is we're both encompassing. Come and join. Come and be part of it.
Mm.
And someone said to us, "Oh my God, it's so lovely being in that 2-hour bubble. I don't want to go home."
Mm.
Because it doesn't matter who you are, what you do, doesn't matter. So we run retreats now. We get 30 to 40 people. Lisa's running a women's retreat. There's 45 of them next weekend.
Mm.
And people come in, and there's people who aren't seen in their world for whatever reason. They walk around invisible, and they come to these nights, or they come to the weekends. Hey, there's 40 of us there, all swimming together. Lisa in the middle, leading the charge. I think there's me at the back of you in there, Jeffrey. Should be. And people feel seen for times, and it's very interesting because they have shifts. You know, their self-worth.
Mm.
You know, people feel loved.
Mm.
It's a strange thing, you know, especially for the men. I run a men's group, but we have a circle of men, and we tell each other we love them. I always speak to Jeff and I say, "Love you," on the way home.
Mm.
On the way home, when we hang up.
Mm.
And it's a strange thing. I've been there and blokes look at me. So, you know, it breaks the stereotype.
Mm.
It's good to be vulnerable. Oh,
Yeah, but you don't realise how powerful those three words are. You know, I think the classic case for me personally was working in the city. We used to work in Eagle Street. We're on the old wharves there before they pulled down a series of buildings there to build Riverside. And there's a situation that occurred when one of the boys in work there said, "Drew, whatever I said today, love you." So I said, "What's all that about?" As you would, yeah. So he told me that the night before, his wife at the time had an argument with another lady at work, and they never resolved it. And that lady got killed in a car accident. And so she's forever buddy realizing that she may have been the contributing factor to that. Yeah. So hence the reason this fellow would say it. And I thought, well, that's really powerful. It is, isn't it? Yeah. And I'll tell you what, another role model for me, you won't believe this, is Ozzy Osbourne. And, you know, the rocker?
Yeah.
And he used to have a reality TV show. Anyway, his son, because Ozzy was in the kitchen there, and they had the daughter, and then they had the wife accompanied with her name there, Sharon. And so the son comes in, I mean, you look at bloody Ozzy and think, he should have been dead years ago. And all of a sudden, out of his mouth come these words. And he said to his son, "A real man steps up and apologizes. If you're going to apologize, you're a man."
Right.
Bloody hell. So I thought to myself, Ozzy, you've been living this length of time just to say his words so everybody in the world could listen to. what you just said. Pretty profound. Isn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah. A real man can apologise. Mm.
And it's breaking the stereotypes. It's breaking that Australian stereotype. And then we're going back to vulnerability. And being heart-based. It's a terrible cliche. I'm not big on cliches, but, coming from your heart rather than coming from your head. And that's what I try and do when I remember. And that the trick is, it's like driving a manual car. When you first thing, you got to think about it. And what I do, if you look at my phone and you look at I'll turn it off. In my alarms, I have a half an hour alarm. So I set my alarm on my phone every half an hour to remind me to sit back in my heart.
Wow, that's really dedicated, Cameron. That's great.
Hey, look, I used to base my success as a spiritual man on hearing dead people, and that never went real well.
How many did you hear?
Not that many, but I do hear the odd spook now, so it's all right. And
did that guy who had his neck cut off at the first day?
I was dead. I was like this back way back there. I had no sensitivity. But what I'm getting back to is that, I almost feel a bit weird talking about this, but I take this very seriously, and I do hear spirit now, and they say to me, if I dedicate my spiritual path to as much as I dedicate to my health and fitness, because I'm vain. I said, if you're vain, of course you look after it. That's why you look after yourself. So if you dedicated that much effort to this thing, you'll be a master. Mm. You'll be a leader and you'll be a guru. Mm. Not guru, that's not the right word. A leader. Let's call it a leader. So I based my self-worth on being, that's it. I based myself on being a bad boy. So now I'm learning to rebase my thinking that it's good to be a good man. Mm. Good to be a heart-based man. And sometimes the alarm will go off and I'll say, sit in my heart. Okay, I'll sit. I might go 5 minutes, I might go 10 minutes, I might go half an hour sometimes between that and the next alarm. Or sometimes the next alarm I'll go, I could be bothered. I'll wait another half an hour. But the more I practice it, the easier it becomes. The more I don't have to concentrate on it. Mm. And the Bhagavad Gita, and again, I'm not a book reader, I'm not one of these bookworms, but I remember I listened to it about 4 times on audio, and it says to walk aware, but to be conscious that you're connected to God at every moment. I got a bit caught up on the God word, so I kind of threw that to a side. But I've gone to the point now that I'm connected to Source. That's a way back one. That's a way back then. That's probably 3-4 years ago. Lisa, there's a photo of our men's group in the lounge room. Lisa was doing some lovely work with women. And they said, why don't you run a men's group? And I said, what do I know about running a men's group? So we grabbed a few of our friends together and we sat down and we shared. And we stopped at the end and we all looked at each other and we went, that was bloody good. And we've been doing it ever since.
And that, for me, is the difference, is when you're prepared to be in your heart.
Yes.
It just is profound. It's just a different level of interaction, just like meditation is a different level of being for your brain, and Qigong is level different of movement and flow that we generally don't do. But we have access to them, but we have to practice it.
And when I sit in my heart, or we're getting back to that level of where I say, like the Bhagavad Gita says, that if I sit in that point, then I am aware at every second that I'm connected to Source or to consciousness. Mm. I'm like, there's us. That was at Sedona, Jeffrey.
It was, yeah.
Sedona, Lisa's a trance medium, so we're at Sedona doing a channeling event. It was really lovely. So when I'm sitting in that point where I'm sitting in my heart, this is practice. That I'm sitting in the point that I know that I'm connected to Source at every second. It's like Frodo putting the ring on. And suddenly everything is different. Mm. Everything I hear is got that beautiful ring to it. Everything I see is got a beautiful feel to it. Every taste is more beautiful. Mm. And I sit in that lovely level of gratitude and for a while, it was very tough. It was overwhelming
Mm.
because I was much more sensitive. For a while, it was hard to even function because I was almost in a heightened state.
Mm.
And I used to practice in the car. It was pretty naughty one morning, you know. Because what used to happen, Lisa used to transmit, and we did little one-on-one sessions.
Mm.
And her guide said to me, I like that one. You've been going through my Facebook there. So her guide said to me in a trance session, stop talking on the phone in the car. Stop ringing everyone in the car. Your car is your place where you connect to us, because it's the only place where you can sit in silence.
Oh.
Turn the busyness of the world and just drive.
Mm.
Yeah, what do they know? I don't do that. And so I used to talk, and I used to just carry on as if it was normal. And then one day I got pulled over by the police. This is about 6-7 years ago. And talking on the phone, the policeman comes over, and the days have gone where you can say, I used to be in the job.
Yeah,
They don't work anymore. They don't work anymore. Nothing more ex than an ex-policeman. And he let me off.
Mm.
I couldn't work it out.
Mm.
And we used to have Monday night channeling nights.
Mm.
And this was a Monday. So what we would do, we would go to Govinda's. We would come back and do an hour and a half channel, which I've got it all, hundreds of hours of recorded. Me and Spirit. And it was beautiful. And then we'd watch Game of Thrones. That was my best night of the week. It was my best night of the
What
week.
a contrast.
But hey, look, I'm real. Keep it real.
You are.
So this day, remember, I got pulled over that morning.
Yeah.
And then, Lisa went into trance. The first thing they said, how many times have we told you not to talk on the phone in the car? And I said, I beg your pardon? They said, we were there this morning. Who do you think got you off the ticket?
Wow.
And they said, stop talking over morning and sit with us.
Mm.
And that's how it started. I started to sit in silence beyond the meditations,
Mm.
and everything changed.
Mm.
It became easier. I didn't care about talking on the phone. I don't need the music. And for that hour while I drive to Brisbane, I just keep constantly reminding me that I am a human having a spirit having a human experience.
Mm.
And as I sit in that grace, let's call it grace, as I sit in that grace, I can feel Source connecting to me. I feel greater than what I am.
Mm.
I feel more than just this physical body. And everything is beautiful. And then the phone rings and I forget. But then what happens, like my alarm goes off and I go, oh, that's right. I'm spirit having a human experience. Don't forget. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
And so what's happened is yesterday was my birthday, and that's my benchmark.
Mm.
Because I've been getting little messages saying at 57,
Mm.
it's time for you to step up, big
Oh.
boy. And I've been practicing, and we talked about commitment and discipline. And so this is my year.
Mm.
And even in this last week, I've stepped it up, and sitting in that grace and that feeling is so beautiful that the lad doesn't matter anymore. I don't have to be the lad.
Mm.
I'm
I think
sitting
that's
in my
something-
authentic self.
Yeah, I think that, that when you have that, when you can get to that stage where you don't have to play act anymore, it's, such a relief, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
So if people want to, it's your year, if they want to see more of you, hear more of you, interact more with you and with Lisa and your group, how do they connect with you, Cameron?
Well, there's two ways. If you want to deal with Lisa, it's Lisa St. Ambrosina. It's called stambrosina.com.au. Oh, that's a great one. Because, look, I love community. And 2 years ago, we started a spiritual ball. We had 200 people from different levels of different areas of the spiritual community. It all had their own tables. And we're going to do it again next year. And it's a lovely chance where everyone can get together and think so. But the main one is the infinite connection. We run beautiful events, sound meditations. Lisa does a wonderful monthly channeling divine guidance.
Mm.
and we do that online now. We have over hundreds of people online who watch us from all around the world doing channeling. And we do another, as part of this Academy of Infinite Success, we run a one-on-one Create the Life You Love. So one Wednesday a month we do Create the Life You Love, where we choose a topic. There's me and Lisa in trance there in that photo down there. And we do that where we do meditation for people. We create subjects which we discuss, whether it's and work through it. We do a live and online. This is that photo there. That's the men's group on the jetty. During the winter time, we light a fire on the jetty, and we do our men's group on the jetty, which is really lovely. And we run lovely events with sound and meditation. Lisa does beautiful healing work, profound. The main thing, it allows you to feel safe. There's a lovely photo of us with 30 or 40 people.
So I think we've got some of your connections, friends here online. They're saying hi. Cindy Marie, Katie Wetterkamp,
Katie.
and then Lee Smith.
Yes.
Hello.
Lee was one of the originals in our men's group, and still comes today.
Yeah.
And he will agree. The good thing about the men's group is that you realise that you're not the only one with the problem.
Well, that's a relief.
There's always someone worse off than you. And when you come back to the group, it keeps you real.
Yeah.
Our mate from Liverpool, he's got beat 7-2 on the weekend, is telling you, look in the camera. Oh,
there's the thing there. I just saw the board there.
Hey?
I just saw the little, there's the chat bat thing.
Yeah.
So Lee's done a lot of work with men stuff all over the place, but we still love to come back and meet once a month. We have a meal. We talk about our successes, and we talk about what's our burden, or what's our hurt, or what are we working through at this very point. And what I've done this year is I'm stepping it up, and again, I get very embarrassed about it, and it's all about self-worth, but I'm very good at doing meditations. I always say I've got a voice for radio, but I've got very good meditations. So last month I started doing meditation in our men's group, and everyone loved it. My fear was that they would not, but why wouldn't they? It's just my own fear.
And for people who live overseas, do you do one-on-one work?
Lisa does. She does beautiful work on Skype. Yeah. She gets clients all over the world who deal with her with Skype.
So Lee Smith is saying 6-1, whatever that means.
He supports Liverpool. I support Manchester United. Manchester United got whacked severely. They got their bum smacked 6-1. It's just a disgusting game, and his team got beat 7-2 in equal. So there's a bit of banter going on.
There's a lot of banter.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with banter, but we're all heart-based. I love that man. I love Lee. He's a good man. I love Katie Waterkamp. Oh, my God, she's the soul of the earth. And these people have been around with us for years. And it's family. It's family. No one's judged.
So it's like a soul tribe.
I hate the word tribe, but yes, it is. Yeah. Tribe, I don't know. It's just that's presses one of my buttons. It's a beautiful community.
I feel the buttons being pushed.
Yeah, but people meet.
Yeah.
They form beautiful friendships. They have beautiful friendships in it, what we do, but they have beautiful friendships what they take. There's one of our, we used to do sweat lodges. We had 30 men there in their undies that day. It was hilarious, but it was really tough as well, wasn't it, Jeff?
Yeah.
Lee was there. So if I find something I love and something that touches my heart, or what Lisa and I love and what Lisa and I touches our heart, we share it with the people that we love.
Well, good on you for building that community and being brave enough to talk about on radio about your own path. There you
And
go.
the same.
He's got a halo on there. The return to innocence or the return to being
look,
unity.
you know, when you're connected, and I'm going to get fluffy, but, you know, if you want to connect to that beautiful grace, that beautiful feeling of completeness, one of the best ways is to come back to that innocent part of yourself.
Mm.
And it's not easy sometimes when you've had a big life. And that I have to make that decision. I choose to make that decision to return to that innocence. And then everything's easy.
Yeah, many people don't actually realize that we still always have a part of ourselves that is innocent and untouched, regardless of what we've done or what we've been through. And how many mosquitoes have landed on your testicles?
Exactly. But, you know, the other thing too is, and
was I allowed to say that on radio?
Yeah,
You're going to get censored now.
No, I didn't press the button. So the other thing is when we use, I'm just trying to think how can I explain it. When I catch myself in the grumpy, we all have grumpies. You know, we have different choices where we can go. We can stay in the grumpy. We have an opportunity to step up and be better than that. So, you know, some people say, I choose love and light. And I say, well, I don't do love and light very well, but I do gratitude very well.
Mm.
So when I catch myself, this is part of being disciplined. When I catch myself in the grumpy, I look for things that I'm grateful for. And suddenly, as I find that thing that I'm grateful for, I feel the gratitude. And I can feel it in my heart. My heart is a magnetic field. And as I feel that gratitude, I radiate gratitude. And life is easy then, you know? And then when I tend to sit in those levels of gratitude or grace or joy, that's when the synchronicities start to happen. And I test it often because I'm a cynical bugger. And I put it to the test.
Mm.
And you know, I think it's I have lovely little sayings. You know, one of those is "Thy will," and I have mantras that I say. You know, I bless and prosper everyone in my world, and everyone in my world blesses and prospers me. So if I come across someone who pees me off, I say that until I feel better. Of a morning, thy will be done. Today is a day of completion. I give thanks for this perfect day, where miracles shall follow miracles and wonders shall never cease. Sounds like a thing. I say it enough and I believe it enough, and astounding things happen. And what I find, I do cold calling, and I look for the miracles, and I look for those wonderments every day now, and I find them more than synchronicities. So I'll give you a classic example, and it happens to me all the time. I was down at Cabarita Beach, of all places, and I was cold calling. So I had a handful of brochures. I was about to walk into the Cafe Mod Barista, I can remember. And as I went to walk in, my phone rang, and this woman says, "Excuse me, I wanted you to come and do a quote for me." I said, "Well, sure." I said, Where are you? She said, "I'm a Cabarita." I said, "Turn around." And I waved to her.
Wow.
And that happens to me quite often. And I'll go to Brisbane and I say, "All right, guys, give me some quotes." And I'll be out the whoop whoop in Brisbane. Suddenly I get quotes all the time. And that's a beautiful thing of manifestation. And Jeff's very much a manifestator as well.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful things happen. The more I have them happen, the more I look for wonders. The more wonders I see, the more I believe. And life is good.
Well, we certainly have found a way to welcome them into your life, and
Look for the good.
Yeah, it's most people don't realize we kind of set up a psychological bias, and then we end up in a vicious cycle, or a cycle
loop.
of manifestation. So, but each time it's our choice, and we define what's going to happen with our choices, with our conscious choices.
Mm.
So Jeff, bringing it back to the divine masculine, because I know you invited Cameron in particular for this reason. Is there sort of, and you have this great way of summarizing.
Oh, well, last week we had Joy and her quest of being living off the grid and being in the female aspect of nurturing and working with plants and then just working in harmony with people. I think that's what females do. You just watch in the Lion Kingdom, you might see 5 lionesses. They hunt as a pack, and the old fella's sitting back just watching what's going on. So, and then you watch it in a human world, and you watch it in real estate. I've watched it quite dramatically in real estate, where the males, they're the predators. They go out and look for the soul contracts, but the females will always network and go conjunction with other females. And that's because they've learnt how to work together when they've had their first child or the second child. A mother always knows that she's going to lose her son to a woman, and that woman's going to take her back to her tribe, because when she's pregnant, she can then have mum, there for helping and assisting with the upbringing of the child. But if you don't have that network, then you're working with other young girls who've got a child as well, and so girls have become more nurturing, but also more sharing, and they're working together in conjunction, just like them lionesses going for the feed and attack. But our females in the human race complement each other. Us males have always gone for the big kill to bring back, the hunter, the feed back to the family home. But Queensland may be a benchmark in the sense that we only had a minimum amount of people. I remember when I first arrived in Queensland back in 1978, I think our population was just a tad over 1 million people in Queensland, if I'm not mistaken. And so everybody knew everybody. And now we're looking at 5 million people. And so in the last 40 years, that hasn't been natural procreation. We're all fully imported, either from interstate, or they come from New Zealand, or they've come from South Africa, or they come from the UK or Canada, or particularly now in Asia. So these networks that we originally have no longer exist, because if you haven't gone to school and you hadn't played sport or communicated in other realms, whether it's playing Magic, the Gathering, as young next generation do, you have to build those networks, and that's where we sort of have to try and do that. And so when someone goes to join a sporting club, or they go and join dancing, for example, or the movie club, or whatever, when something like this that first started off, it was called the Relaxation Centre down in Brook Street in Brisbane's Fortitude Valley, and they've had 30, 40, 50,000 people go through there, where they have all these self-development courses. So we've seen another generation come through, which has been Cameron and Lisa, particularly on the Gold Coast, where it's heartfelt, heart-centered, and instead of having a family that we've left behind in another state, another country, we've had to go commence a new family and have that connection. And you want a connection with people who have similar outlooks and feelings of life, and so that's what brings people together, isn't it? And at the end of the day, it's that magic 4 words called love. And if you have that propensity to show love, and it's not about money, you can really produce miracles. That's what I see in Cameron. I see Cameron as a male who trips over, falls, picks himself up, brings back the smile. He's still a man's man in the sense that he'll say words that we're used to.
I can be a bit naughty.
Yeah, well, we're used to them. But I mean, but then there's something about them in the sense that people gravitate towards people who show ability to service or serve. And Cameron has that in spades, his ability to go out and serve. And he'll tell you that originally, like the money and all that stuff, it was taking the business world and putting it in the spiritual world or personal growth world. And him and Lisa actually have made it affordable for people to actually follow their dreams and to make it a viable income stream. Whereas before it wasn't. Everybody would purely do it at the kitchen table. Now it's outside and mainstream. People becoming more aware of natural health, and I think that's got to look at Cameron and Lisa in the sense of if they can do it, you can do it.
Correct.
And that's really where we're at. And for males who've sort of lost their way, and it's how it goes out to you because we understand exactly where you're coming from. There's nothing worse than losing a job or get made redundant, retrenched, or you have to go and work casual because the companies no longer employ people because of the unfair dismissal laws. And then, you try to be a provider for a family and you try to be locked in and solid and being in the moment. But when you walk in the threshold of the home and the woman brings out her voice, it can be quite destructive. And for a male who receives that commentary, it can be so destructive to the point that if they're not in control of their emotions, they can actually, another primordial energy will rise up, and they'll slap that woman around, they'll beat her, or they'll just pack their bags and go because they don't need that. And I think that what Cameron and Lisa are doing is actually saying, fellas, bring your lady or come to these retreats or come to these one-day things and just see what it's like to get in touch with your emotions and talk about your emotions. I mean, we've always had AA and we've had Gambling Anonymous, but I think coming to a group that hugs and loves, I mean, that's what all humanity wants. We just want love. And if you can find that, no matter what, motorcycle racing or mountain bike riding or horse riding or just walking down the beach, holding hands, we all want love. There you go.
And when my cup is full, when I have the ability to fill my cup, I have the ability to share it with everyone I deal with on a daily basis. I share it with the lady at the petrol station. I share it with the lady at the cashier. I share it with the cranky old Indian chef at the restaurant down the road. I share it with you now.
Okay.
As I work with me, I work with everyone else. I bless and prosper everyone in my world, and everyone in my world blesses and prospers me. Wouldn't that be a lovely world?
I think the main thing that we've learned, to be perfectly honest, is that you don't have to go to church because when you start doing the qigong that Julia does in the parks, or tai chi, or yoga, or just walking on the beach, or dancing, or singing, and get into the creative energy, and you start shifting that energy, you realize what you've just said before when you were down at Cabarita and the woman rings you, and you're just there at the shop. I mean, that's self-realization. That's being in the moment and realizing that you have the ability to manifest it. And that just getting into your emotional body. For a male, it's really hard to get in touch with your emotional body.
Winton, we all know Winton, Lee's there. Winton calls us, we're all powerful wizards. We just don't know it. We all have the ability to create magic.
Yeah, in the present. Yeah.
In the present moment. The past and the future.
It doesn't matter.
I live in the present.
Yeah.
Anyway, Julie, what do you think after Julia? What do you think after listening to Cameron and myself?
Yeah, no, it's I'm
Welcome to the Man Cave.
yeah, Yeah, it's not too bad in the man cave.
We've gone from the story to the serious now, haven't we? But
Yeah.
it's a lovely place to be.
Mm.
Because the story is just what gets me to where I am now.
Mm.
It makes me the man that I am now, with flaws and warts and all.
Mm.
And then I forgive myself for the warts and the
Mm.
things I've done wrong.
Mm.
And I live in the present.
Mm.
And I treat everyone as if they are loved.
Mm.
And the world's, hopefully, the more that people come to our events, the more that they learn, because people come sometimes to get a fill up. They go, I'll come fill myself up, go away for a month, then come back and get the top up.
Mm.
But the whole idea is what happens, people learn to fill their own cups and then they pass it on.
Mm.
The world's a better place.
Yeah. So well done to you, Cameron, and Liz and Jeff, for, being those role models and, sort of showing that it is possible and sharing those practices, awareness practices and disciplines that you do engage in, all those little tools that you have to stay in the flow with our beautiful audience that's online with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Hope we didn't talk too much in the story.
No, it was a great story. So thank you very much. So thank you very much, Cameron Monley, for joining us.
Okay.
That shows us everything's possible.
And that's it. If a mug like me can do it, anyone can do it. I remember once a friend or associate called me a raw diamond. No matter how rough it looks on the outside, there's always room for improvement. And I went, oh, I like that.
Mm.
It's a good place.
Right. So next week, Julie has sorted this lady in America. So we're going to be running at 8 p.m. Queensland time, 9 p.m. Queensland, Victoria, Tasmania, ACT. We're just going starting an extra hour purely because of the time zone difference in Florida. So tell us what's happening, Julia.
Yeah, I guess next week is a medium, and she does speak to spirits of people who've crossed over. In this case, they're famous people like Benjamin Franklin or Andy Warhol, Albert Einstein, and of course they're still around and they're still observing what's going on in humanity in our stage, and they're also sort of reflecting what they could have done better. And she basically interviewed them telepathically and then wrote a book about it. So it'll be really interesting. Farrah Fawcett as well, and some of the civil rights activists. One of the Greek. So yeah, join us next week, 8 p.m. for Conversations with History with medium Susan Lander.
Thank you for inviting me, Jeffrey.
Okay, Julia
Thank you very
asked.
much. Yeah, I did.
Give
I'm
credit where
hurt,
it's
I'm hurt
due.
now.
Eh?
I'm hurt now. I thought you did.
Well, because we had the theme on it, she wanted to bring balance, and I totally agreed with it.
There you go.
Yeah,
You're our balancing act.
She who should be obeyed. Have we got this little
And the lovely Helen's online now. I love Helen.
Yeah. Hi, Helen.
I just sit with Jeffrey on Tuesday nights at Helen's.
There you go. Feel good. Nice to see you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.